Welcome everyone to the Compliance Edge podcast. Now, I'm your host, Muluwampunduchola, and I'm going to take you through a number of topics around business, compliance, corporate governance, risk management, ESG practices. We are going to debunk everything that you've been wondering about to set you up for an amazing business ahead of you. So today, we are diving into a topic that I find so interesting. It's called risk management. And risk is all around us. There's the risk of getting in an accident when going for work. There's the risk of getting divorced when you get married. And most importantly, there is also risk in business. Whether you are selling visits or you are starting a multinational AI company, there will be risk. But the smart thing to do to preserve your business is to mitigate that risk. So we're going to go into that, and I have listed a number of questions for myself to answer that I'm thinking you'll probably be wondering about around this topic. And so let's go through that together. After that, we will take two questions that have come from the audience, and we will also read a Bible verse because that's just my favorite thing to do. So let's get right into it. Okay, so we are starting with question one. What is risk management and why is it essential for businesses today? I'm going to read the definition that I wrote here. I hope you don't find that as a crime. Reading is fundamental. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating potential threats that could impact your business. Okay, that's a very straightforward definition. Identifying, assessing, and mitigating. So you would point out what could potentially be a risk to our business, meaning what threat could our business face. As we go through, we will find out what exactly those threats can look like. They're different for every business, but some of them are common across all sorts of businesses. Now, one authority that is extremely referred to in the risk management world is the ISO 31000. It was written in 2018 and it sort of just codifies the idea of risk management. Okay, and they give a very profound and simple definition. They say risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. That means it's an uncertain world. So many things can happen, right? Politically speaking, in terms of even pandemics like the COVID-19, or just anything that could happen to threaten your business. And your business would be that objective that has been set, meaning you have an objective to make money or to sell goods or to do whatever it is that you're doing, maybe in the NGO space, whatever it is. So the effect of that would be a risk, right? So these threats could be financial, operational, legal, very important on the legal, technological, or reputational. As studies have found, reputation damages so much to the business. When we look at the effects of risk on ESG on risk, we are going to look at the social aspect that comes in when having a business. We are basically looking at what happens when society doesn't accept your business or agree with the moral standing of your business. It affects your finances, it affects your reputation. And so we'll be looking at that also. But those are just certain types of risk. In today's volatile environment where economic shifts, cyber threats, regulatory changes are common, it's very important to stay ahead of the curve. And that's what managing risk is doing, staying ahead of the curve. Now, our second question is, what are the biggest risks companies face in 2025? Because we want to talk about now. Okay, I assume maybe you know a lot about risk, maybe a business person, or maybe you are learning it for the first time. Either way, talking about the current situation is what is going to benefit you the most. So, what are the biggest risks companies face in 2025 and how can they prepare? AKA, how do you identify the risks you face in 2025? How do you assess them? And how do you mitigate them? Okay, we are solution oriented over here. So we're going to go with that. Okay, so businesses today face a number of challenges. With the move of AI and technology, one of those number one challenges is cyber security threats. Okay. Everything is internet based. Even I'm right now connected to my computer, and a lot of information on my business is probably on this computer, not giving you any ideas. But it's very important for this kind of device which holds such information to be secured. Okay. In Zambia, we have seen that we have caught up with the curve. We now have the Data Privacy Act of 2021, and that has brought so much conversation. We also have the Information Securities Act, which is also a powerful tool. And we started off with the Electronic Communications Act that at the time just focused on criminalizing use of certain electronic communications, or rather using electronic communications for evidence. Lawyers will know that Section 8 was always handy when you are defending the use of digital data. Okay, but with the Data Protection Act, we are now focused on protecting information that is used or brought in by a user for a specific function. So, for example, you go to a hospital and you give them your information because you want to be treated for this disease, and that hospital sells your information in order for them to, build up statistics around certain things. You probably have questions around that, and your data needs to be protected. So the act comes in to speak about that, but it's also how we as a nation have responded to the threat of data being misused, meaning that risk management goes as far as even the adjustment of regulation. And I think that's very powerful. It means that countries change their standing in order to mitigate new risks. So you can't really exhaust every risk. I mean, you can try, which is why most companies have a risk registry, because things change, and the ability of those risks to affect your business in a more difficult way than another is probably here and there depending on the season, which is why we usually talk about risk right along with probability. So what is the probability that this is going to happen? um, how can I mitigate the risk of it happening, and how can I solve the issue? Or it's probably not going to happen, so the risk of it happening is reduced. When we look into how risk is spread out, you see that most companies use color codes or different mechanisms to be able to see which risk is most likely to happen versus not likely to happen, and what should be priority for them. Okay, so cybersecurity threats is one of those risk challenges that are a big deal in 2025. Number two is regulatory changes. So compliance requirements are becoming stricter globally. Okay. It's not important just to know regulations only because of your business and how it's running. It's because compliance requirements have become strict. Regulations come with regulators, and those regulators have become very much more adamant in 2025 about maintaining things, which is why we as a podcast are focused on the compliance edge. We realize that compliance is one of those tools that helps you stay ahead in business. Of course, compliance is mandatory when it comes to regulation, but different aspects of compliance help you as a business, including the compliance of your internal policies, the compliance of your internal procedures. It's important for order to create your business as a well-oiled machine, and to give your employees that surety that they can rely on policy. They will sue you if you don't. So either way, compliance is a tool that needs to be used. So regulatory changes can really shift the balance of a business. If, for example, a regulation excludes a certain group of taxpayers, okay, say, for example, would have regulation that would say maybe foreign investors have a tax holiday for a certain period of time, and then a new regulation comes in adjusting that period of time. It would mean they would have to maneuver their business to be able to handle that extra expense. Okay, so it's extremely dicey sometimes when it comes to regulatory changes, depending on the size of the business, but it is worth noting and taking care of. So again, it's a risk. right? Supply chain disruptions is another risk. Geopolitical tensions and climate change can disrupt the supply. For example, you're a milling company, and all of a sudden, your farmers are not able to bring in maize as much as they were able to a year or two ago. That would that would destabilize your supply chain, and you'd have to make alternatives that may be more costly to you. So having that risk, identifying that risk, makes you stay ahead of the business curve. Number four, economic instability. These are the challenges that we are facing in 2025 when it comes to risk management. Economies change, and there's little or nothing you can do about it, especially if you're in a country like our own, where we have to keep an eye on the dollar rate or things like that. And if it shifts from a certain place, of course, it affects how your business is being handled. So if you're to stay ahead of the business curve and be able to withstand the turmoil of being in the business environment, you definitely have to acknowledge that as a risk that needs to be mitigated. So now that we've seen how these four critical things are affecting businesses in 2025, let's go back to just understanding those three steps of risk management, which are identifying your risk number one. So when you identify what risk you're saying, it shouldn't actually be as difficult as they make it seem in a lot of these textbooks. I want to simplify it for you. It's pretty much you listing everything that you can imagine may happen to your business that may be a threat. So you can say political change, climate change, some unforeseen disease and all that kind of thing, or change of employees. All those are risks. And then when you assess, you'll be able to say, okay, what is most likely to happen, and how can we as a business mitigate that? So assessing is looking at each and every one of those things that you have listed down and being able to see, okay, what's the likelihood of this happening? If it does happen, how would it affect our business? You need to have a proper study on what that looks like. Okay, so that takes using your imagination, but also using statistics and precedents and seeing how it has affected other businesses, because one way or another the business environment will respond. So our sponsor, Vantage Point Risk Consultants, does risk compliance, ESG. And one of the principles that we use at Vantage Point is looking at organizations as individuals in society. So we follow the King 4 reports on corporate governance that advise businesses to be responsible as a corporate citizen, meaning you are taking care of your environment, that we are taking the principle of Solomon versus Solomon and implementing it, understanding that a business is an artificial, an artificial individual. Okay, it may not have hands and legs, but it is a player in the business environment, which is somewhat a society for businesses. And so in that way, it has obligations and things that are expected of it, and it also has to follow certain rules and laws in order to perform its business effectively. And so when you look at it from that angle of corporate citizenship, it is important that you manage your risks in such a way that you assess and consider how it will affect you as a corporate citizen, taking into account, of course, reputation, legal implications, and all that kind of thing. So as we move to mitigating the risks that we have now identified, of course, we would have set priority according to what is most likely to happen and what is not, and what is urgent to the business. If, for example, something happening opens you up to a huge legal risk, then it would become a top priority. For example, not being in compliance with certain regulations, or not having good internal policy, that is a high risk that opens you up to legal issues. Okay, getting fined by regulators, businesses closing, or even being in conflict with your employees, and that would be problematic. So the right thing to do is to put that as a top priority on your risk registry, and then you'd find ways to mitigate. So mitigate just means solve the problem. Okay, you are basically saying, if I've identified that compliance is a legal risk, then let me appoint a compliance officer, or better yet, let me call Vantage Point Risk Consultants, um, so that we can help you look at your risk registry, ensure compliance, and make sure that you are set to conduct business freely. So it's all about taking action when it comes to risk management. Okay, companies should just prepare and conduct regular risk assessments, because the business environment is always evolving, and genuinely the environment changes all the time. Okay, if at the top of your risk registry was you know, employees getting sick because at the time you started your business, you're in the middle of COVID 19. But now, 2025, that is no longer a priority for you, because we are not dealing with that on a daily basis. It's still a risk, but maybe it's gotten down on your risk registry. And what has come to the top that was barely a risk is maybe the loss of electricity supply, which now has become a top priority. And so you would come up with risk mitigation strategies to handle the effects of not having electricity. Now, that may cost your business some money that was unforeseen, but if you manage risk properly, you would have always had something in the coffers that would be able to say, okay, say we have no electricity, what are we going to do? Well, we'll have solar panels, or we'll do ABCD. That is your way of mitigating risk. Okay, so how has the regulatory landscape changed, and what impact does it have on corporate risk management? I have no idea why I was asking myself these hard questions, honestly, but it's for all of our benefit. So I'm just going to go there. Okay, regulations are always evolving, but what's so peculiar, of course, the ISO 31000 put things in perspective for us in 2018, and from then there's been implementation and companies having that better guideline on how to go about risk. But now something amazing has happened. Post COVID 19, the world realizes that we need to respond to how our environment changes. And so there were businesses that thrived and businesses that collapsed because of this unforeseen risk. And we have taken the time to now study what is the difference between those businesses that succeeded versus the businesses that didn't do so well. And ESG is a response to that, okay? It comes up to bring up three powerful principles. Number one, environmental. Number two, social. And number three, governance. So going back to front, governance in that the companies that had a powerful corporate governance structure were able, okay, to survive the turmoil of a difficult season, meaning the players who act on behalf of the company. Remember, we said a company doesn't have hands and legs. You can bring me a company that has hands and legs. I'd love to see it. But so far, it doesn't have, a typical company doesn't have hands and legs. And so, according to the Companies Act number 10 of 2017 and all other regulation all around the world, um, a company has directors as its agents acting on its behalf, and these directors are given authority, delegate this authority that they've been given to act on behalf of the companies, hence having CEOs and CFOs, and them having managers and employees and all that stuff. They are all acting in line with this responsibility on directors to act in the best interest of the company. So with a company that has an excellent corporate governance structure, a board of directors being supported by a company secretary, a CEO, ABCD, these companies seem to survive better. And so, again, compliance comes in. When you comply with the requirements of the law, and not only the requirements of the law, because depending on what country you are in, the law may not have really evolved to accommodate the best practices of corporate governance. So, having your research done and being able to follow guidelines that are best practice, that means looking at companies that have succeeded and also coming in to see certain frameworks that are maybe not a law per se, but a strong recommendation for businesses. would be able to help you mitigate that risk that comes from bad governance. One of those is the King 4 reports. King 4 reports are actually standard in South Africa, but many businesses in Southern Africa and across the world have adopted those reports for principles like corporate citizenship and just how simply they have codified the role of a director, the role of a company secretary. And King 4 is an evolution from King 1, 2, and 3, but I think it's really captured very well, of course, with room for growth. But at this point in 2025, it has captured very well how that governance structure should look like and how best to go about it. So, if you're advising an organization, it's always good to make reference to those kind of reports alongside the statutory regulations that you may have. Okay, and then we come to S. So I went back to front. Okay, the S aspect talks about the social risk of conducting business. So ESG covers lots of aspects of business, but this time around, I want you to look at it through the lens of risk management. Okay, so social in terms of the risk of not being socially accepted as a business. That means businesses operate within communities, okay, and so businesses have to go out of their way to gain that social ticket or social license, as I love to say it. Why gain the social license? Because it's simple. If society doesn't accept you as a business or doesn't patronize you, then your profits are minimal. Okay. And most businesses are set out to create profit, but even if it was an NGO, they still want to be able to create impact. And so when we talk of social, that's where that aspect, that risk on reputation really comes in. Because if your reputation is plummeted, then the likelihood of you being accepted by society is low. And so it's a very important aspect of managing risk because it actually affects how the business runs. And so many companies have dwindled away because of risk not being managed well. In terms of the social license. So a key that comes in there is corporate social responsibility. That's where you see companies going out of their way to, really engage with society's needs and see how they can be helpful, especially that socially speaking, most of your resources, human resource or otherwise, come from this particular community. So it's the aspect of corporate citizenship really being implemented to say you need to contribute and do something for this environment that you're working within. And one of the organizations that I've seen, at least in 2025, really thriving in terms of corporate social responsibility is actually Yango Africa. They've been amazing, giving away cars, sponsoring students, and I think that's really amazing to see in terms of corporate social responsibility. So I am the chairperson of the Environmental Law Subcommittee under the Law Association of Zambia. And so environmental issues are really a passion of mine. And it's so important because what happens is that is the aspect of ESG. That's the E aspect. And what they note in the principles of ESG is that those companies that took consideration to the well-being of the environment seemed to thrive more than those that did not. So very interconnected, the environment, the social aspect, and the governance. Because what happens is you take care of the environment, society is more accepting of you, and your governance structure has more to go on. So when it comes to environmental issues, a perfect example is Zoom. They responded to the needs of the environment. They pretty much have a paperless service, and it was well natured around the environment, hence them thriving, but they also answered the need of society during that time when people were going to isolation, that people wanted to be able to meet without compromising their safety. And so that was very powerful. I can't speak to their governance structure, but I assume because of their success, they probably have one that is manageable. Okay, so yeah, that's what I would say about the landscape of risk management changing. That the more we learn, the more we are able to add on to how we can manage risk and what is more important with risk management today. Okay. Next question is, what role does technology like AI and big data now we've got DeepSeek as well, play in modern risk management strategies? Okay. I would say it plays a big role. Why? Whereas we would probably have to, have so many stakeholder engagements and guess what is the most likely risk and all that. With AI, it helps us predict what risks a particular business would be able to face and occur. And while big data analytics allows businesses to analyze trends, so identifying those risks that could have fallen on the wayside by analyzing, using tools like Power BI is amazing, because then you can see this is what we usually face. Even when it comes to something like customer complaints, if you had a system that entered customer complaints and you're able to use this statistic, or analyzing mechanism to identify what customers complain about, it would be a good place for you to start to mitigate that risk and solve that problem. So AI has been helpful. Of course, we always say that, it doesn't take away your human experience and what is there for you to resolve, but it's become a powerful tool in terms of risk management, and I would advise not to shy away from it. I think it can help a lot of risk managers do their job easier. Okay. What are some common mistakes businesses make in risk management? Oh my goodness. I'm so glad to be answering this question. Number one is thinking risk management is not important. You just can't go into business blindly. And that's what it is when you ignore risk management. It's you going into the business like this. Okay, literally not knowing what can affect you or not, and sort of learning along the way like a teenager. But you want to be prepared. You want to step into the business environment as a good corporate citizen, mitigating your legal risk, mitigating your reputational risk, going forward and making sure that you know exactly what you're doing. And yes, there will be changes, but if you do your risk registry well and you are able to really forecast everything from what's most likely to what's not likely, you would have an alertness. Okay. And like we said, risk management is constantly evolving. You need to keep going back. Okay. That's the second tip for businesses. Keep going back to your risk registry. Don't abandon it. Okay, keep going back there and make sure that your risks have changed according to what you're experiencing in the business climate at that time. Okay. So also having, so I'll call that not updating your risk plans. Okay. Also, lack of having a risk culture. A lot of businesses have the tendency of having this very robust, nice risk document, and then employees know nothing about it. So conduct training around risk. Let there be a culture of mitigating risk. Let employees know that what they say matters. Okay, how they manage their social media carries the reputation of the business. It's a reality. Okay, let employees know the risk of not, of leaving their laptops open or not taking care, that there's data privacy issues that could be breached. So creating that culture within the organization really ties things together, because organizations can have good intentions, and then because of not following through and checking and training and coming back to it, they open themselves up to another risk. Also, it's a huge risk if you don't hire vantage point risk consultants. Yeah. Okay, so my last question is, how can small businesses implement risk management strategies with limited resources? A lot of my heart goes out to SMEs, because it's not easy building something from scratch. Kudos to you for making your dreams come true. But you can work smart and not hard. You will not need funding for just every single thing. You can create a risk registry yourself with these tools that I have given you. Recognize them, prioritize them, okay? Train your staff to be ready for these potential threats, and leverage AI, leverage affordable tech solutions to help you out and step in and consult experts. A lot of, I know I joked about it earlier, but genuinely, a lot of what we do at VPRC is to be that consultant that is able to walk you through that difficult place of I don't know what laws are going to affect me in this business that I've started. I don't know what to do. So we create a compliance framework for you. We walk you through implementing that framework for you. And then we also help you identify those risks and give you strategy to mitigate those risks and set you going forward, having that awareness of this environment that you've been placed in. So as an SME, don't victimize yourself. Make sure that you are doing everything that you can and spending your money where it actually matters to foresee what's coming ahead. Otherwise, risk management is a very loaded topic. There's so much, so much more we can say. But I think for this aspect of part one, we are good. Now, we had a few questions sent in, and I will answer two of those questions. Okay. And when I answer those two questions, then we will move on to our Bible verse. So thank you very much. Um, Let me just see the questions. And if you have questions for us in the future, please feel free to comment your question on our YouTube platform or send a DM to the Compliance Edge podcast, and our team will be happy to send me the questions and have me answer them the next time. Okay. Okay, let me see which two questions to answer. Okay, this is a very good question. What happens if a Zambian business fails to be regulatory compliant? I think they meant compliant with the regulations or something like this. Well, non-compliance is not a good thing for business. It can lead to fines by regulators, okay? Regulators like PACA, SEC, Bank of Zambia, or whichever regulator is handling that aspect of your business. Another regulator that you should watch out for, ZRA, if you're not paying your taxes correctly, non-compliance can lead to fines. It can also lead to legal action. If you are not complying with the employment code, your employees will not just let you be. They will sue you, okay? And that time you can't come and see Vantage Point Risk Consultants because we do not offer legal advice. Okay, thank you very much. You can lose your business licenses, and you can also have just reputational damage. We've seen a lot of organizations, especially in the US, just losing their high because of a bad advert, because of negativity brought about by maybe their owner's reputation. So stay compliant. Very, very important. Okay, that was a good question. Thank you very much. Another question, what role does corporate governance play in risk management? So we talked about this a bit when we looked at the risk of ESG, the G aspect. Very, very important because corporate governance is the structure of how the whole organization works. So if the people at the top are making decisions that take into account risk management, the business is most likely to thrive. It ensures accountability, transparency in every level of the business, and definitely ethical decision making. So at Advantage Point, with our training program, we help businesses be able to strengthen their governance frameworks and minimize risks of fraud, mismanagement, compliance issues, and just not really knowing what you're supposed to do as a board member or otherwise. So again, you can reach out to the team if you need training for your organization just to align with your goals. Okay, so those are the questions we will take. I'll take only two for today. And thank you very much. You need to promise me that you'll be back in the next episode of the Compliance Edge podcast where we will unpack more business things. Now, to close, I'm going to pick up my beautiful gold Bible. That was a gift from my mother-in-law on our wedding. And I'm just going to open up the book of Job, okay, where we are taking our Bible verse of the day from today, okay? So our Bible verse for the day is coming from the book of Job in chapter 42 and verse 5. It's a very simple Bible verse, but I think it's just so powerful. It said, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. And this is Job speaking to the Lord. And I just wish you that the Lord, that you may be able to not only hear of the Lord, but see him in your life. On that note, we are grateful. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on notifications so that when our next episode comes out, you haven't missed a thing. And follow us on LinkedIn. Of course, we need to interact with you. Vantage Point Risk Consultants, and on Facebook and Instagram as well, Vantage Point Risk Consultants Limited. So please follow us. Vantage Point is a proud sponsor of the Compliance Edge podcast, and we're very happy to have you here. We will see you next time as we debunk more mysteries of business.